Scott, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I am excited to dig in and learn more about you and your business. We had an intro a couple of weeks ago just to kind of talk high level, and I got super jazzed. So, Scott, why don't you start by telling us about your business, or businesses maybe, and we'll get into the backstory and yourself and unfold this thing.
Well, that sounds great. My name is Scott Harms with MetalQuest Unlimited. I'm the president. I actually started the company 28 and a half years ago. It's been an interesting ride. From day one, we always tried to be different than other companies. Anytime you start a new company, obviously everybody knows a lot of companies fail, which is tragic. I mean, it takes work, it takes luck, it takes, perseverance and all of those sorts of things. But to me, you got to do something different. And in 1996, we bought a multitasking lathe, or I did. That was the very first machine we bought. It was a 3-axis CNC lathe, and multitasking was not a word then. Essentially, you were supposed to have a 2-axis lathe and a vertical machining center, and that's just the way you did it. And that's the way it should be done. And there's only one of me. So everything we've done from that point is built upon that in terms of automation, in terms of multitasking, and trying to produce the highest quality parts we can, in the minimum amount of operator intervention.
So, Scott, were you a machinist before starting your shop? What was your background before that?
So I've got a very aggressive background, I guess, in terms of what I did to myself is the best way of putting it. I grew up on a farm. I'm a farm kid. Growing up on a farm, you learn a lot of mechanical type things. A lot of, family farms are more independent, I guess you might say, in terms of, they do a lot of their own repairs. I mean, they're creative, they're craftsmen, that sort of thing. And what actually got me started is we had an engine lathe and a mill that were government surplus machines. And,
cool.
I don't think we were really very good at running them. I played with them a little bit. I worked on engines and stuff like that when I was a kid, and I just developed a mechanical appreciation. I liked them well enough. I ended up going to a 2-year college and got an associate's degree in machining with this, with the intention of coming back possibly to the family farm and working on them. I really enjoyed this particular field, and I went and got a job in Lincoln, which is the capital of Nebraska, and worked at a job shop. And it's, a lot of people say when they do things like this, I mean, you literally don't know what you're doing. So at age 22, I actually started MetalQuest Unlimited. I had just turned 22. I had just gotten married.
Wow.
I had no idea what I was doing, and it was a horrible business plan. I would absolutely never, ever recommend it. But I worked hard. I tried to do things intelligently, and, along the way, surrounded myself with some really good people that I'm really proud of. People I consider friends, people that I consider coworkers that I respect a lot, and we've done some cool things. Yeah.
Wow. So you clearly had an aptitude and an affinity for machining, starting with those surplus machines on your parents' farm and going to community college. So you must have only worked in that shop in Nebraska for a short period of time if you started your own shop at 22.
Yeah, about 18 months, to be honest.
Okay.
It was a short time. And again, I wouldn't recommend all of these things, but I had a pretty fast career path there. And I say that because I got out of college and I was very aggressive. I was the type of person that would take the manuals from machines home and just literally read them. The type of person that would take tooling catalogs home and read them. And, a lot of what you get out of life is what you put into it. And I was kind of a geek like that in the sense that, I wanted to learn more. And, my boss at the time gave me opportunities as a result, and I proved myself. I was making parts that other people struggled with, very early on. And, it was a smaller shop, and in smaller shops, a lot of times you have, faster opportunities when you prove yourself.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And did that shop just have 2-axis lathes and 3-axis mills, or how did you
Absolutely.
get the inkling that no, we got to go more automated right from the get-go?
Well, to me, it's like it was common sense, but no, that shop did not. I mean, they did it the way that everybody else did it. And as I was thinking, as I was looking, like, especially I didn't run the machining centers. I was on the lathes more so. And I really got annoyed by always having to take parts to the mills and communicate with other people. It's like, if this drill in the lathe just spun, I could pop this hole pattern, or I could tap these holes.
Sure.
And it seemed like a completely unnecessary waste of time.
Right.
And, it was multifaceted, because I was the only employee of the company for the first 6 months. And when you're the only employee of a company, you have to make your time count. So every aspect I thought about, even on the front end, I mean, that's one of the things that I do feel I got right. I had to make my time count. I had to make the machine's time count, because I'm everything from accounting to sales to quality control to the setup people, setup person. And anytime I could keep the machine running, doing as much as it possibly could with the least amount of human intervention, it allowed me to do something else and basically be more efficient. That was something I recognized, that I would have to be efficient early on, because it was just me.
Sure.
And like I said, our company is built upon that.
Right. So obviously, buying that first machine, one with live tooling, or it was more expensive than the other, but you realized and thought that was you're willing to spend more on the machine because you realize how much time it's going to save you on the back end. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. It's a totally fair assessment. And to be honest, within about 2.5 months of starting the company, I ended up getting the first job that needed that capability. And that was a differentiator. And again, everybody has these types of machines now. So this is not anything rocket science or like the latest and greatest secret.
Sure.
But in 1996, it wasn't common. Yeah. And I firmly believe we would have had a lot harder time getting started if I would not have had that particular capability on that machine, because again, it was a differentiator, and it got us a door open that actually got cash coming into the company, which allowed us to start paying some bills. And obviously when you're starting up, you got to scrounge, and it's all important.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's very cool. I can relate a little bit. I was 24 when we started our shop. And our first lathe was a Nakamura Tomy with live axis and a subspindle, live tooling and a subspindle.
That's
Didn't
awesome.
have Y, but it was used actually. It was a used machine. And that machine is still running today in the company that bought Pro CNC 8 years ago or so. 10 years ago now. Geez, time flies. But it's so crucial, because if you can be cost competitive on a part that has a hole pattern on it, and some other shop cannot, you're very likely to win that, make good margin on it, have that cash flow to grow the business. And the incremental, lease payment or whatever, payment to buy the machine between a non-multi-axis machine and a multi-axis, it's not that big of a difference, but it can really make a difference in productivity.
Correct.
Yeah. Awesome.
Absolutely. And
so
at the time, the salesperson said, okay.
No, go ahead, please.
At the time, the salesperson did everything he could to talk us out of it, because it's not as versatile. I mean, I'm sure he wanted to sell another machine. It was an incremental cost on top of that. It wasn't as much as a vertical machining center would have been, but he was trying to tell me all the reasons a vertical machining center would have been, not only more efficient, but more capable and a more intelligent purchase.
Got it.
And it's like, I'm thinking right now of being efficient. And right now, I don't have any work for this company at all. Right. I can spend more on a particular lathe, but less than a lathe and a mill. And it's like, I got to start somewhere.
Yeah. So then let's fast forward all the way to today. What does MetalQuest look like as a business? How many employees, revenue, who do you serve? What are your specialties, industries, that sort of thing?
So we're definitely a lot more complex than day one. We have about 85 people in 2 different locations. We service multiple sectors. The oil field has typically been a bigger one. It's down right now. I know it's down for a lot of people since COVID. It's never really recovered. Power transmission, agricultural, hydraulics, little firearms, sectors like that. We try and keep ourselves diverse for all the obvious reasons. And what we really specialize in doing are more family-based parts that typically are going to be a tighter tolerance type component. Again, really lending itself well to the multitasking type capabilities. They're parts the average shop can't do. And we've got quite a bit of technology in terms of robotics, in terms of that multitasking automation that, I guess, again, makes us more of a differentiator, I guess you might say.
Right.
Again, 2 locations being North Idaho and Nebraska.
Yeah. Well, I want to dig into the 2 locations in a minute here, but before we get there, what did the growth of the company look like over the years? Was it fairly linear, add a person or 2 every year or so, every couple, obviously by 80, you're adding 3 people a year on average, maybe. But is that what it looked like, or did you have some big spikes, and how did you go from just yourself to what you have today?
In the beginning, when you're starting a company, as you want, everything is a spike. I mean, it's very difficult starting a company to have any kind of linear growth because it's so volatile. Obviously, you're looking for higher margins, but you're also needing consistency. Every hustler that's ever done anything like this, it's basically you want to make sure you've got something on the table tomorrow. And that hustle never leaves your body all the way to this day, 28 and a half years later. Right. So my team around me sometimes has to back me off, and I'm glad for that. Because you're always worried about not having something to do tomorrow. And that's where the discipline comes in and the maturity, as you age, not just in wisdom, but, maturity and the company and all of that. But probably the easiest way of describing it, I mentioned about 2.5 months into the life of the company, we got the first job that really used that particular capability of that machine. We got into a hydraulics company probably in about March of the next year. That was a differentiator for us. We started producing, again, more complex, higher volume, more consistent, but sometimes, lower margin, but it kept us doing things and it kept consistency. You've got to have a combination between technically complex, higher margin work along with consistent work. The more consistent something is, typically the lower margin it is, but it helps you build an infrastructure. It helps you build a foundation. So, right. Even to this day, we try and look for what we can do to make sure we have a foundation built that's going to give us consistency and reliability and, be able to make solid projections while still looking for the complex stuff that may be a little bit more volatile that just, kind of may come and go.
Got it. Interesting. So going back to that first job and then the second company in the next year, how did you win those customers? Were you knocking on doors, looking in the phone book? What did you actually do
Absolutely.
To go find them?
Exactly. Because we didn't have the internet. I mean, in 1996, right. It was in its infancy.
Yeah.
So yeah, you got in the vehicle, you knocked on doors, you hustled, you networked, you made connections, you asked, you begged, borrowed, stole, as far as information. And like I said, it's just, you're a scrapper. You have to be a scrapper to get started. That's probably one of the biggest things that, I mentioned before, like I'm a high energy person. To me, you have to be a higher energy person if you're going to do this because it is just so much work. I know in your series, you talk about this being, the hardest business in the world. I think this is the hardest business in the world. And I ask myself a lot why I do it, but you become so passionate about it and you become so attached to it. I mean, to me, it's so rewarding to see your team around you do things that is, it's so freaking cool. And you leave a dent, it's like you walk into a store, you walk somewhere and you say, hey, it's like I made this part on this product right here. It's like I'm directly involved with this. It's rewarding for your team and it's something to rally around. That's why I do it, I think. Because like I said, it's fun, it's rewarding, it's challenging. You can't be an idiot and do this anymore. You just can't. It's very technical, very specialized.
Yeah, for sure. Well, your energy is infectious. I love it. When you were making the growth moves to buy, there's always that sort of chicken and egg with buying equipment versus getting jobs for equipment and, which comes first. How did you think about that? Did you say, all right, I see, my clients having a need for this type of work. I'm going to go buy a machine and then approach them and say, I can do that. Or did you get RFQs that said, hey, can you make these? And you're like, well, if I buy a machine in the next 30 days, yes, I can make that part for you. How did that happen?
That's such a great question. And that is such a balancing act. On day one, I did not have a customer. Reference the comment about horrible business plan. I did not have a customer on day one. So I bought a machine and literally said, I've got this. Can you please send me something to fill it? Yeah. From there, it's kind of a balance, and it involves strategy. And that's something that, as the company's evolved, we've looked at a lot more. To me, a customer never wants to hear, I'll buy a machine if you give me this project. Mm-hmm. Because at that point, you're obviously unproven. Like, you're not doing this now. They don't know if they can trust you. They're putting blind trust in your ability of doing this. So if you want to grow a given direction, in my mind, you have to either do it incrementally or you just have to jump in the ocean. And we've done combinations of both. We've grown towards certain technologies, incrementally building a foundation to get to that technology. And sometimes we've literally jumped in the ocean and just said, hey, I'm going to go buy this thing right here and I'm going to go find work for it. But, you got to be intelligent about it. Some of the bigger machines, the bigger outlays of cash, you probably remember Field of Dreams, if you build it, they'll come. Well, that's a really dangerous business philosophy sometimes because they very well may not, especially when you consider international outsourcing and stuff like that. They may run away.
Yeah. That I love that you brought that up, the outsourcing. So it sounds like, with the high automation, you're working in volumes that are higher than probably many job shops. Is that true? Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're probably more, and if it's not, defense related or aerospace or things that are maybe harder to outsource, there's more of a likelihood that you're getting work that was outsourced before or could potentially be outsourced. And how have you made that work so well for you?
Well, that's another great question. You have to look at the total supply chain start to finish, and you have to put a value proposition in front of your customer that makes it easier to stay domestically than send it internationally. I firmly believe most companies in America, they want to keep stuff domestically. The things that they have problems with are everything from price being one of the biggest factors. I mean, that's one of the first things that sends stuff overseas, but also poor service, poor customer service, the reluctance to take care of other aspects of a particular component from a domestic supplier. To me, we're a very dynamic company. And from a customer service side, just think like if you walked into a mechanic and say, I want you to work on this car. And he said, I'll change your belt, but I'm not going to change your oil. It's like, what? It's like, no, that's what we do.
Sure.
Like, that's not going to get you very far in that, that particular service sector. Yeah. We're the same way. Like, we approach things from a total supply chain, all the way from very efficient raw material procuring, whether it be castings, forgings, tubing, bar stock, all of that. A lot of times mill run quantities, different things like that. And then taking all the way to the outsource aspect, whether it be secondary processes from mag particle to coatings to platings, different aspects like that. I want to provide as much value to our customers as I possibly can. And it turns you into more of an OEM in terms of the people you have, because we have people in positions the average, I will say machine shop doesn't, and they're much more procurement based. And we've actually hired some specialists for that. But when I go to a customer, I want to make it just as easy for them to keep it domestically as to send it internationally, because these international companies are not dumb. They've got these supply chains figured out. Now, it's obviously halfway across the world a lot of times. So therefore, the inherent advantage you have is you can respond faster, and that matters. You're a more dynamic type vendor. But when they're coming and saying the fact that I will consign this inventory for you, I will, put it on your doorstep 3-4 times a week if you want, watching the quantities that you have. And I'll take care of literally every aspect of the supply chain to make sure all you have to do is basically receive this in as a finished component. That's what they're doing now. And, to me, if you want to be competitive in that environment, you've got to do it too. Because I do think there's an inherent desire to keep stuff domestic. You just have to figure out a way to do it at a cost structure that allows you to be competitive internationally.
Sure. So with all that, was COVID a positive thing for you when all those supply chains and ships stopped moving? And did you see new part numbers coming your way and your clients saying it's just too much risk to have it that far away?
So that's another great question. There were winners and losers in COVID, and I'm going to be the first to tell you we were a loser in COVID. Oh, wow. And we were a loser because a lot of the markets we were in. The oil field got decimated during COVID, as most people know. And unfortunately, that was one of our biggest sectors at the time. What I guess the fortunate elements of it, yes, we did get RFQs. A lot of companies, wanted to get out of certain countries very badly. One thing that I think is just unbelievably, it's hard to explain, but they'd send us an RFQ and we'd look at the raw material cost. And that is typically, I'm not saying it's typically, but a lot of times that's the price that particular company is paying for a fully machined part is literally the cost of raw material. Now, the comment I made before, it's you have to be competitive internationally. Well, we all know that some of these international countries, they're not quite playing fair. So you can't go broke doing this sort of stuff. You just have to find good fits. There are certain parts that lend themselves going internationally better than others. You have to recognize where you can provide the value domestically. So what we did during COVID is we took those opportunities and we tried to build on them. We had put several things in place prior to COVID. Nobody knew that was going to happen, but we just got lucky on that.
Of course.
That allowed us to dynamically rebound a little bit and pivot. With all the problems a company like us, in terms of our sector and why this is such a hard business to be in, the one advantage we have is we're dynamic. We're not attached. If you make parts for boats, okay, and the marine industry is down, you're down with the marine industry, and there's a lot of times you can't pivot out of that. And that was just an example. We can go from sector to sector to sector, and within those, somebody is probably going to be up. Right now, I firmly believe the economy isn't doing as well as a lot of the metrics are saying. A lot of shops like us are down. So what we're doing is we're pivoting into sectors that are hot, and, we're adapting. And the other ones are going to be back, and we're going to be ready for them. But you just kind of move around technically, working your way into areas that keep you diversified, and you maximize the opportunities at any given time. Basically, you can't rest.
How do you keep that nimbleness? What did you put in place that was fortuitous pre-COVID that allowed you to adapt? If you're willing to share.
Absolutely. So diversification is probably the biggest thing. We had done some, I guess, relatively more obscure things in looking at ways to diversify, simply because we knew that we were pretty attached to the oil field, and we knew this was a dangerous position to be in. So we started, doing things in terms of sales, in terms of getting our name out there, in terms of advertising, things that I'm glad we did them at the time. And I'm glad we learned what we learned, 6 to 9 months early, because we really had to lean on that stuff pretty hard. And those systems, in most cases, weren't in place when we needed them the most. Right. So, basically, we had about a 9-month head start on what we needed to be doing with COVID, and that made a huge difference.
Wow. That's very fortuitous, or wise. Can I ask what percentage of your business the oil field was when you made that choice? And was it looking at just
about 70 to 70?
Okay. 70 to 75%.
Yeah. I'm sorry. About 70 to 75% probably at that time. And we're down to about 30 to 35% right now.
Wow. Okay. And that was just sort of looking at your business from a 50,000 foot view. What are the risks? What do we need to do? And then strategically deciding to invest more in marketing and sales and diversifying.
Correct. because we had the infrastructure in place. I mean, especially from a customer service side, from we actually were private labeling an entire product line at that point in time. We were doing everything, all the way from cardboard box acquisition, the assembly. Like, it was literally a final product ready to go to their customer. And the only reason we weren't shipping it to their customers because they didn't want their customer to know we were making it. So that's the type of infrastructure we have in place to this day. So we could pivot to other sectors. We just needed to do it. And that's what we were getting a head start on doing.
Got it. Okay. Did you hire salespeople, work with a marketing agency? What did you actually do on that side?
Pretty much all of the above.
Okay.
The actual salesperson came a little bit later he came in 21. He was somebody that I knew along the way that was aggressive, and we brought him on. Yes, we hired a marketing team. We hired a lead generation team. I mean, these were all things that, we were kind of working on, again, going back pre-COVID. But I mean, once the world started falling apart, to me, it's like there were two types of people: the people that just kind of stuck their head in the sand and it's like, wait to see what was going to happen, and the type of people that aggressively, it's like, this is the time to rebuild. This is the time to attack. And we were much more of the aggressive company that rethought what we were doing. And like, I put way too much effort, and our team has put way too much effort into this company. It's like, I ain't stopping now. It's like, we're going to figure this out.
I love it. Yeah. We wrote a blog post recently about, when the storm comes, be the ox, be the buffalo, not the cow. And I don't know, you might know this from being a farm guy, right? Cows will walk away from the storm and spend more time in the storm, where buffalo will head into the storm and pass through it faster and come out the other side more quickly. And that sounds like exactly what you decided to do.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And that is exactly what we did. Like, I'm not one to just sit around and wait for somebody else to solve a problem. And, my team isn't either.
Yeah.
We all, I guess, divided and conquered in our own ways and figured out how to do things differently.
That's fantastic. So I'd love to talk about your second facility. So why don't you tell us the background of deciding to do that? What you do there, what's special about it, and why it's not just an addition on the backside of your current business.
Absolutely. And our second facility, it all came out of COVID as well. So we really did try and make that time and use it to the best of our ability. So I mentioned before, like, I'm a farm kid. The county that I grew up in right now has 5,500 people. The county, not the town, the county.
Got it.
So it's, a little more sparse. It's kind of in the middle of a cornfield sort of concept in rural Nebraska. The advantages to places like that are typically very good work ethics, morals, ethics, values, mechanical aptitude. You got a good quality of life overall, lower cost of living. I mean, there's some really good advantages. The disadvantage is there's not a lot of population. Right. So when you're 22, you're really not thinking 20 years down the road. You're not thinking about the fact that you literally may outgrow this area. You don't think about what the area as a whole is doing in terms of age, in terms of demographics, in terms of different things like that. You're street hustling. You're trying to pay tomorrow's bill, to be honest with you. That's what you're thinking about.
Absolutely.
And, this was a problem we were having. I mentioned, we do a lot of robotics. We're an authorized FANUC internal integrator. Those are things we had to do to literally grow and find ways to grow because people were harder to come by. So knowing all of that, knowing that we were, very dependent on the oil field during COVID, we said, hey, if we're ever going to do something different, this would be a really good time to do it, especially when the economy theoretically and the whole workforce is kind of on a temporary hold. So we've been to a lot of different areas in the nation. We picked North Idaho for a couple of reasons. We're in the Coeur d'Alene area with our second location. We're actually in Hayden right now. Hayden, Post Falls, Coeur d'Alene, kind of a cluster.
Yep.
That gives you access to, pretty much a 1 day's drive from Salt Lake City, Portland, even Northern California, Seattle, places in Montana from Missoula, Butte, Kalispell, places like Bozeman. It seemed to be a very central area to a lot of technology, a lot of new potential regional customers in an area that was pretty pro-business, that was growing rapidly. And again, during COVID, it grew very rapidly as people were, moving from other places because it's beautiful here, to be flat honest. It's got a, pretty good quality of life, and it's an area that I thought that we could probably recruit to, pretty easily. It is quite a ways from our original location, but one of the things that I was very conscientious of in our team, we did not want to be a competitor to ourselves in any way, shape, or form. So you stop and think about that. It's like, okay, I'm in rural Nebraska. Like there's a couple major towns, around us that are all very nice. I mean, they're very nice areas. I mean, they're growing. I mean, they're good places to be. They're close enough that we would have ended up not really having unique identity between the two different locations, between our company itself. And I guess elaborating on that, it's like, Lincoln is about 90 miles, probably about 80 minutes, via interstate, from where we're at. It's like that's close enough at that point in time. I wouldn't have gotten a new regional customer because, I mean, that's nothing as far as drive. Sure. It would have been a little bit harder to distinguish, like, are you in this location, or in that location, because they're so close to each other. And I wanted to create a new unique identity. I didn't want to have the same machining type concepts, the same core technologies, at that location. Otherwise, like there's enough shops in this nation right now. The last thing I wanted to do was build a second one to compete against myself. Right. That just didn't seem to make sense. So what we started doing is we grabbed a machine that we had, purchased not that long before that was totally unique in our Nebraska facility. And we used that as the baseline and the foundation of starting this particular location. And in 3.5 years, we've added a couple more of those and added a couple more technologies that we do not have in Nebraska. So we do pretty much radically different things, while they're similar parts and they're similar concepts, they're at different volumes using different technologies to where it gave us a lot of diversity and, uniqueness as a company while also giving regional customer service.
Got it.
If that all makes sense.
Yeah. And not pulling from the same labor pool, clearly. So
absolutely. Yeah, because I'm creating a new labor pool at that point in time.
Yeah, in a much bigger community. Obviously, that whole core Spokane area, Coeur d'Alene, is vastly bigger than 5,500 in your county, Nebraska.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can you elaborate on the equipment and technologies you're employing there?
So the very first machine we moved out was an index multi-spindle. And I used the Field of Dreams analogy before. An index multi-spindle is probably going to break you if you go Field of Dreams, because it's a very expensive machine. It's a very complex machine. It's very cool. It's very, very powerful. That was the machine that we started this particular location off of because it's kind of a portable factory in itself. Much higher throughputs, much higher volumes, much higher efficiencies. And that was one of the things that was working very well during COVID. It was in a sector that wasn't the oil field. We actually specifically bought it because we knew it would diversify us out of the oil field. So that was something that happened. That machine came in November of 19, which at that time was by far the most expensive machine we ever bought. At the worst possible time we could have bought it if you would have looked at the world events that were about to unfold.
Sure.
So to say that was scary is a mild understatement. But because that was one of a kind in Nebraska and very, very unique, we thought that would be a good one if we were going to put something uniquely different within our company at a new location and start from scratch with it. That would be a good candidate. So we've added 2 more since then.
So I have an inkling about what those look like. I've seen them at some customers and what they cost. Can you just share roughly for those that aren't familiar what an index multi-spindle machine is?
So a lot of people are familiar, people use the word screw machine, and some people call screw machines like a Swiss type lathe, and some people call them cam driven, multi-spindle machines. Yep. I typically have always referred to like screw machines as being cam driven multi-spindle lathes. This is a CNC version of a cam driven multi-spindle lathe. They're very sophisticated. Putting in perspective, like the 3-axis lathe that I used, the very first 3-axis machine, you had your conventional XZ and then you had your C axis and then with the live tooling and stuff. Yep. the first machine, the multi-spindle we bought, is literally a 62-axis machine. There are 62 axes controlled simultaneous. You have 8 main spindles, all with C's, 4 Y's, dual slides per each individual spindle. Then you have dual synchrons, which are essentially a pickoff spindle that each have their own slides and capabilities. In this instance, in most cases, you're actually machining 10 parts simultaneously. So you're going to have a much faster throughput. Where if you take a conventional, like I described before, you've got one tool in the cut at all times. I mean, you could have 12, 14 tools in the cut in these machines. If you're doing either pinch turning type concepts, OD, ID, right, that sort of stuff. It's radically different in terms of that. That is
amazing. And these are upwards of $1 million a piece.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Wow. And you've added 2 more in this Idaho facility. So you have 3 of those going.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Wow. That's a serious commitment.
And again, you asked the question before, which is valid. Do you buy the machine and go get the work, or do you get the work and then buy the machine? And it's got to be a combination of both.
Right.
We were able to get into this platform because we had families of parts that had consistent usage. And we knew that it wasn't enough to dedicate one, but we had built enough work up incrementally to at least get into the door with one, I guess you might say.
Right.
And then we built from there.
Right. So this question isn't on my question list, but I think it's applicable. The most expensive machine we ever had was our 3-spindle Toyota pallet system. But I can remember quoting and working on, and even that equipment, we had clients that said, that we were already good customers, good suppliers for, and they're like, hey, we have this big program, we'd like to award it to you. And whether we had the equipment or not, we would invest obviously tons of R&D and tooling and fixturing and everything else. And the hope and the goal is that project will continue for years to come and just be a real, positive generator of cash and margin. But sometimes things happen and the customer says, oh, it was supposed to be a 3-year contract. That's actually what we signed with you, but we're 9 months in. Things have changed for us. We're just canceling it. And you're kind of left holding the bag with either a huge machine payment or some other, thing, just the investment you made. That's obviously not what shops want, but that happens all the time, right? I've talked to many companies that had a good contract, and so I'm just asking because the scale of the equipment you bought and the investment, obviously, to tool up something like that, it's not like swapping over a new part number in a few hours and just hitting go, hitting cycle start. So
absolutely.
What would you say to shops when they're considering a big investment of money or time or both for the promise of a contract, which hopefully is solid, but it's not like you're going to take your customer to court and say, well, you have to continue buying these parts from me. How do you balance that?
Well, that's an excellent question. And the standing joke we've said before, just like you said, it's not like you're going to take these companies to court because most of the time they probably have a law department bigger than your company. So no, you're not going to take them to the court. They're going to win. You have to, like every machine we buy, even though they're expensive, even though they're specialized, they're also adaptable. So you take like the index multi-spindle that I mentioned. It's adaptable to other sectors. It's adaptable to other things. Very seldom, do we buy something that is so dedicated to a customer that we can't repurpose it to something else. Mm-hmm. And the only times we do is when you have a proven knowledge or a track record that gives you that sense of security. Mm-hmm. Everything you described happens all too often because people get aggressive and they get ambitious and like they see dollar signs and they see opportunities and, they want to believe so badly. But, many, many times we talked about international outsourcing before, a company will launch a particular product or something like that and they see dollar signs too. And unfortunately they see the smaller dollar signs by sending stuff to over, halfway across the world, and you're left holding the bag, and you literally get burned, and you're not going to take them to court. And even if you did, you're going to lose. You're just going to throw good money at bad. So being able to dynamically adapt and pivot out of that, is to me very, very important. That becomes difficult sometimes in the automation and stuff like that you throw at things, because most time the robotics and stuff become, a little more dedicated, but they're still adaptable. I mean, they're just a 6-axis robot. You just pull it off and you stick it on something else. I guess that's one thing, we've always had a little bit of discipline on that aspect and said, hey, let's either throw an NRE down up front that gets enough of a, I guess, buffer from a capital layout standpoint that we've at least covered ourselves and not exposed ourselves. To me, it's suicide if you're going to buy the machinery and you're going to buy the automation and you're going to lay this all in for a company that literally just does nothing more than give you a purchase order and the promise of future business. That's a dangerous game to play. It really, really is. Some people get really lucky and they make a lot of money, but I think there's probably more that end up getting burned in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's good advice. So get some NRE if you can, and if the cancellation comes, just be adaptable, pivot, go pursue other markets, or hopefully you already have been pursuing other markets and just have that pipeline ready to move it into something different. And don't sit around and cry about it. Just be decisive and move ahead.
Yeah, and it obviously, you take this stuff personally because you put blood, sweat, and tears into these projects, and when they pull them, especially when they pull them, in a more of a dishonest type way compared to what they've told you, you got to get over it. I mean, it's like big companies sometimes do some really bad things, and you can't let that take you down. You have to, rise above. You have to learn from it. And, we've lost work internationally, and it's not our fault. Literally, it's not fair sometimes. We can't compete at the same, we can't compete in the same dollar figures, I guess you might say, that some of these international countries are playing in. But you dynamically adapt, and it sucks, but you become better for it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Learn what you need to learn from it, improve, and just move on. Let's talk about robots. When did you buy your first robot? That was not just like a built-in bar feeder or, something like that. An actual true robot. What was it for? What was the project, the machine? And then how did that expand and open up your thinking into just doing more and more of that?
So very similar to like the 3-axis lathe we bought, we knew robots were not going away. We bought it in 2011-ish. I mean, right in that vicinity, I think it's around mid-2011. We did it because everything I said before, we don't have a lot of people around us, and we knew in order to grow, we had to be more efficient. B, we also understand cost structures. In order to provide competitive pricing, we need to be efficient. And that involves lights out manufacturing, a lot of other concepts like that. And we knew robotics were going to be a key to that and be a foundation. We decided to dive into that and learn about that because we knew that it was going to end up to be a very core pillar of our company based on the type of work we do, based upon the type of work we wanted to solicit, and just basically allowing us to grow without really having the luxury of just adding people.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And did you put it on what kind of machine did you put it on?
So we put it on a Kuma Multis, which is got a B-axis. It's like a tool chain. Imagine like a lathe mill combination. We were machining, this was an oil field component. It required a lot of milling, and it also required some very critical turning as well. So the Multis was a very good application for that. It was a casting. And again, we kind of jumped in the ocean. This wasn't a really expensive robot, but we used 2D vision from the very get-go. We knew we had an application. We knew it'd be a good application. And I guess when I say probably jumping in the ocean, instead of going to an integrator, we did it ourselves. And one of the core reasons, there's a lot of very, very good integrators out there, and there's getting to be more good package solutions than ever. And I'm definitely going to knock them. But our goals and aspirations have always been pretty high, you might say, and our ability of challenging ourselves technically, the threshold has always been pretty high as well. And we knew that from a responsive rate and between the ability of understanding costing structures, we really needed to learn how to do this. So we picked, I'm not going to say it was easy because it wasn't. I mean, it was a non-symmetrical casting, and that in itself is difficult to do. But we laid them in a 2D grid and located them in a 2D grid to where our vision, could work relatively easy. And then we loaded that machine. We actually did not have a chuck in that. It was more of a work holding type fixture. It was a tailstock equipped multis with comparable fixturing on the tailstock as well, and just robot loaded. And I mean, we literally ran millions of parts by the time we were done in this particular concept. And that gave us the foundation to learn the basics of it. And we currently have 19 robots. Ironically, the way you said it, we bought the very first robot that was actually directly integrated to a piece of equipment, and it came in about 3 weeks ago. That's the first robot we've ever bought that we didn't buy naked and do all of the integration and stuff like that ourselves. And we did it because it was a great product, I guess you might say.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. That's quite a capability to build up. So have you specifically seeked out and hired people with that experience, or did you just take smart people that were mechanically inclined and gave them the manuals and said, go figure this out?
Both. And that's another great question. I guess to me, there are a lot of companies that strive to put robotics in their company. And there's a lot of companies that talk really tough and say, I'm going to go do this. And there's not a lot of them that I think actually do it right. In order to do it right, you have to have specialists. I mentioned again earlier, you can't just be an idiot and survive in this industry anymore because it's so technical. You need to create subject matter experts. When we view robotics, we have a robotics team, and we have sought people, from the robotics side of things. We have built up existing people with robotics knowledge. You can't just say it's like, all right, I've got a CNC programmer so you can program this robot, and I'm just going to have him go put it on there. The thought processes are radically different. And you need that CNC programmer to do his magic on the CNC machine. And you need your robot programmer to be a subject matter expert. He needs to understand IOs. He needs to understand automation, closed loop, all of that sort of stuff. And they work together, and they work together very, very well. And that's how you put robotic cells together, are concepts like that.
Yeah, I can see the difference. They're such different disciplines in many ways. What did you, the most recent podcast we just released a couple of weeks ago, was also about lots of automation and unattended running, which is ironic. And so we're having a theme lately. What else did you have to learn about, chip management and tooling and coolant and things to be able to run millions of parts unattended? Can you share some anecdotes or just some things you went through in that learning process?
That could be an episode in itself, is the easiest way of putting it. There has been so much learned in so many different things. So, trying to just keep this simple. This is common sense. It's all about process control. If you don't have process control, don't put a robot on something, because it's going to make it more out of control. That's it. A lot of people say, I want lights out manufacturing. To do any form of automation correctly, that robot needs to deal with, and the process needs to deal with literally every single thing a human being does. Okay. And that doesn't mean everything he does on that part. It means everything he does on every single part. The chips, I laugh on that. Take high pressure coolant. 99% of the time, high pressure coolant helps you break chips. And we use a high pressure coolant. I remember one time in particular, 17-4 stainless steel, we had to take high pressure coolant off of it because we weren't getting enough heat in the chip to break it. That when we took high pressure coolant off, the chip became hotter and it allowed us to break the chip. You have to think about ways, and you have to look at things so closely, and you have to keep all of the options on the table. But all of that sort of stuff, chip evacuation, so important. Magnetism. I mean, we have an automation project where we ran an entire heat of material through it, and the next heat came through and it was magnetized. Let me tell you what, you don't want magnetism in any form of an automation project. It is awful. So I had to learn about a demagnetizer, and my team did. Unfortunately, I had a high school classmate that was very good at magnetics at a college, and I called him and I said, I need a favor. I am not smart enough to know atomically what's going on right here. Please help me. And he was super cool, and he did, and he loved it, and things like that. So yes, that entire concept could be an entire episode. But bottom line, you have got to have process control, and you have got to pay attention to literally every detail that a human being does, or could do, or may need to do, if you want to get that lights out, consistent runtime.
Yeah. Yeah, that is, don't put a robot on it if you don't have process control. Is it possible that you can think
Absolutely.
you have process control and you put a robot on it and then you realize that you don't? Is that also a thing?
Oh, in most cases. Yes. Because a robot, while smart, it repeats, it's dumb as dumb can be. No different than a CNC machine. It is going to do what you tell it to, and it's not going to account for what you don't tell it to do. I truly do believe AI is going to get better, and we're going to see some really cool developments out of that. We're not there yet. Right now, we are in more of a two-dimensional world when it comes to robotics. The third dimension being, robots that can start to accommodate other things and factors. But right now, you just have things like soft float, and you do have 3D vision. We actually have a 3D vision cell in there, and I meant that figuratively. But bottom line is, it's important to have good fixturing, have good work holding. You want the robot to more place the part. You want the work holding to accommodate for all the inconsistencies that could come about, just have a robot be more of a parts handler. And that requires a lot of thought and discipline. Then you take all your metal cutting type operations and you throw that on top of it. Then you take things like coolant, coolant temperatures, concentrations. I mean, there's so many little details if you want to get that process right. It's a very methodical journey, I guess you might say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine some people listening and thinking, oh my gosh, that's just an overwhelming amount of manufacturing engineering that I need to do. How would you suggest people that, they might have enough volume in a project that might make sense and they can't find people to help? Where do they even start if they want to take the leap, but they're not sure how?
You got to break it in. Sorry, you have to break it in bite-sized pieces. I tell everybody, it's like anytime you look at a project, whether it's a project to quote, it's a piece part to make or whatever, you're doing the exact same thing with an automation project that you would do when you look at a print for the first time. You're developing an order of operations. There's obviously features on the part that are going to scare you more than others. There's processes that are going to scare you more than others, different things like that. And I guess to build, in the very beginning, you have to invest in it. We bought a robot. Again, we bought a naked robot without any idea how to run it. It wasn't a super expensive proposition, but we committed. I mean, you can't just go willy-nilly into some of this. You have to commit and say, I'm going to make this work. Mm-hmm. In our industry, people are very familiar with buying, we'll say, a CNC machine and putting it on the floor. And they're familiar with it. And they put a part in it, and they run it. And they understand all of that. That's not how robots work. That's actually not how they work at all. You buy a robot, and a robot does what you tell it, just like a CNC machine, but it doesn't have an end effector. It doesn't have a way to compensate for other things, in a way that a CNC machine is just natively built to do. And it's not its fault. Everything has its role in it. Everything has its purpose. So you have to just come up with a project that you think, hey, this will be easy to do. And maybe it's literally dropping a blank into a vise on a vertical or something like that. Those are, relatively easy to automate. Or loading a round part into a lathe, and then you got to think of safety as well. I mean, cobots are nice because obviously they build a little more of the safety factor in because they don't just lay you out like a industrial robot might. But they're slower too. So, that's a trade-off. But you just have to look at the big picture. I mean, this comes back to your napkin drawings that we're all famous for, and the middle of the night thought processes, and you wake up and, hey, it's like I had this thought. But the most important pieces of advice are build a team that can become a specialist in this and commit. Because if you don't do those two separate things, you're probably not going to have very good luck, because you're never going to fully develop what you need to do to get your head wrapped around that aspect of technology.
Mm-hmm. Good advice. I'm sure people are writing this down. For shops that are not 28 and a half years old and are earlier in their journey, what would you give them as advice to help ensure their success over the next decade or more?
That's such a good question. With each year of business we've had, in my mind, business has gotten harder. While you should be getting more comfortable and business should be getting easy, just due to everything from economic conditions, international outsourcing, different aspects, it's hard. You have everything from scope creep with customers, wanting more and more, for a less price. You have governmental regulations that keep popping up. I guess one of our core values is attention to detail. And probably the biggest thing that I would give as far as advice to any young company is that particular core value is attention to detail. What I feel truly has made us successful is having a team of people, that all work together. We have a very flat management structure. I should have said that. As an example, like I literally refuse to let someone call me boss. Like it bothers me tremendously because I'm not their boss. I'm a coworker. I may have a different position within their organization than them, but at the end of the day, if they fail, I fail. And if I fail, they fail. It's that simple. So we're all working together. Having that non-ego driven, attention to detail based mindset is what I feel has been a fundamental core to success for us. And while the world becomes more complex every day, you have to surround yourself with product specialists. You have to surround yourself with talent. And that's going to be hard to find because it's hard finding good people today. But finding things that you can do that differentiate you from somebody else, if you think you're going to make washers and you're going to be super successful, I got a couple of countries I'm going to point to that say they've got a different idea than you. You're going to have to make hard parts, and you're going to have to do things that no one else wants to do. And that's what I've been telling our team too. And it's like, it burns you out, to be honest. It burns me out. It burns your guys out and stuff. But, you got to keep motivating and rise to the challenge because the world isn't getting any easier. And that's somewhat depressing to hear, but unless something radically changes, just due to the internet, due to international competition, due to increasing quality requirements pretty much everywhere, the status quo is going to be different tomorrow than it is today. There's no question. Mm-hmm. So, dynamically adapting is so important. So that was a little longer of an answer than you asked for probably, but
no, it's a great, solid, that's a really solid answer. So I want to, we're getting close to our time. I just want to wrap up with a couple of things. So Matt Wardle from JD Machine is the one that introduced us and suggested you should be on the show. He's clearly a fan of yours. Did you meet him through NTMA or some other way?
I did, and I'm a fan of him too. He's got a tremendous organization, and I have utmost respect for him. And yes, I met him through NTMA. Again, just going back, networking is very important, and just when you find people like that have similar ideals and beliefs and philosophies to you, that have a team around them that I'm not going to say that they push, but that push themselves. Like their team pushes themselves. It's obvious when you see their facility. Our team pushes ourselves. I don't have to be the person that pushes our team. Our team, pushes themselves. You can learn a lot of things from them. And, I kind of mentioned to you before this started, like this is a very difficult position to, business to be in. And, I'm not worried about some of the trade secrets that some other people may be, because I know literally how hard it is to do it. And I know the dedication and the devotion and the perseverance it takes to pull some of these projects off. And if you've got that, I want to know you, because I think we can be better together, to be honest with you, because I learn from people all the time. And to me, I'm not really worried about that person stealing something we do. I'd rather work together with them and learn from them.
Mm-hmm. So good. Well, I want to maybe ask you one last question, again, not on my list, but how do you build a team that pushes itself? And this could be another
it's so
whole
important
hour.
to find. But it really could be. You're absolutely right. It's so important. The culture matters so much. To me, it's like in my position, I have to be a motivator. I have to inspire people to bring out the best. And I've got to provide a vision. I mean, those are very, very important. And I often tell people around me, again, I was the only employee for the first 6 months. I was the programmer. I love doing that part of the business. And unfortunately, in my role today, I really can't do a lot of that. I still have a lot of the background knowledge, and I still know how to do it, but we all know this stuff is perishable. I mean, not only do controllers evolve all the time, but if you don't use it, you lose it. So as sad as I am about it, there's a lot of things I can't do like I used to be able to, that plus age, which also sucks. But what I can do is I can motivate people, and I can see, things that I feel we can do and directions we can grow and technology that we can use. And I can work with my team to make sure that I'm on the right track and that they have buy-in. And then you take all of that and you find young people, especially, that are motivated and just honestly ready to try and go change the world. And you give them essentially a toy box of technology, and you say, like, I want you to do really good things with it. I want you to do cool things. I want you to push it. Teach me something about this right there. And the people you want, which are out there, they're going to do really cool stuff with it, and they're going to teach you stuff. I mean, I've got people around me that are half my age that are an inspiration to me every day that I am so proud, to call a coworker. Unfortunately, some people just really don't rise to that challenge, and that's not that they're bad. I mean, you need those type of people too that are content with doing some of the same things every day. But what you're after is a environment where people, through peer type pressure, continue to challenge themselves each day and learn new things and become those subject matter experts that are just so important. And to me, it's like at the interview process, I literally despise anything that could resemble a bullet point interview. Like, I don't want to ask the same question to the same person every time. I want to know you. I want to learn about you. I want to know what makes you tick. I want to know what hobbies you have. I want to define like you as a person, because while I may not be advertising for a particular job, if you walk in and you want to change the world, I probably want you in my organization, because I'll find a place for anybody that wants to do that, that has the attention to detail and the critical thinking type concepts along the way, which are ultimately important. There's a lot of dreamers out there, but you've got to have the critical thinking, and you've got to have the attention to detail to really, take that dream and turn that into a reality. And we've got enough opportunities out there right now. To me, it's like you find that combination, you find that chemistry. That to me is the company I want to be in. That's that. If I was trying to apply for a company, that's where I'd want to work. And that's literally the type of environment we try and create.
Wow. Well, I'm ready to apply for a job opening that you have, because that was awesome. So, Scott, I can see why
I'm all in.
I can see why you've built such a successful organization. You do have infectious energy. You're definitely inspiring, and I'm sure you've inspired our listeners today. Maybe we will. Maybe I'll hit you up for another deep dive on process control and how to maintain it over millions of parts. So, but thank you again for everything today. This has been a ton of fun, and I know people have learned a lot from you. So thank you so much for paying it forward.
Well, thank you as well. Absolutely. This was fun for me too. And like I said, I really enjoy what I do. I'm very passionate about it. It gets addictive. And I always like meeting people that, have that same passion.
Awesome. So if people want to learn more about
feel free.
MetalQuest, Yeah, I was going to say, how do people reach out if they want to connect?
Yeah, that's right. That's it. So we're a little different. I mean, we have a YouTube channel. You're welcome to check us out on YouTube, MetalQuest Unlimited. North Idaho is a little new, so we don't have quite as many videos, but you'll see, kind of a history of different videos, in our Nebraska facility and a couple from Idaho as well. We obviously have a website at metalquest.net. We're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the major social media platforms. Going back, to what I mentioned during COVID, we put a pretty robust marketing program in place. And, to me, positive exposure to this industry is very good. And we try and do what we can to make it look like the cutting edge technology that it really is.
Very cool. We will make sure all those links are on our website in the show notes. But Scott, thank you again so much. This has been a delight, and I appreciate the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you as well.
All right. Bye-bye.